All right, we are working on exercise 4, and this is to import ozone data. So first it says, using the continuous gas and PM based data operations SOP for directions. So let's consult that, and we look at the first page of this, and it has these hyperlinks. We've already entered the quality control data, so we're ready for importing the raw data from sampler. I'm going to put my cursor over there, hold down the control, and then it turns into a little hand with an index finger, click, and it takes us to this section. So it first tells us about the colors of the buttons on the toolbox, and then it says, please note the following before you begin. The toolbox assumed that the data are collected on the hour. If this isn't the case, for example, if you have data collected every 15 minutes, we can work with that, but please contact us and we can talk to you about how to handle that. Data for each site and each analyzer must be in a separate file, and we will go over some examples of that. And be sure to have the time necessary to complete the full import. It's really common to get confused halfway through. After you've done this a few times, you'll be able to finish it fairly quickly. But the first time you do this, this will take you probably at least half an hour. So the first step is the new import file creation. And this step must be completed outside of the toolbox. And this is looking at your data and making sure it meets the criteria for importing it into the toolbox, which is basically just to be a text file. So it has to be a comma delimited text file and be formatted so that it's got headers, that the data begins in the second row, and that there aren't blank rows in the data. This is really common, and it's the same as if you're importing data into Excel. It has to have dates and times with each new time in a new row, and it says there is a SOP for a toolbox ready file for instructions in case we have to edit the file. So let's look at the file that we have as part of this exercise 4, and this is this new import file. This is data taken off of, I think, a Campbell Scientific Data Logger from an ozone analyzer. And let's look at the SOP for a toolbox ready file. So looking at my SOPs, first of all, you see in my C drive, Tribal Data Toolbox 2.1 folder, and then Help Documents, I have SOP for a toolbox ready file. So looking at that, let's see what it says. Well, it says that it must be a comma delimited text file as it told us before, and it says see the final page of this SOP for a checklist. So I'm going to scroll to the final page and look at that checklist and make sure that we meet the criteria. So let's look at this new import ozone data. It has to be comma delimited, have headers, data beginning in row 2, no blank rows, and each new time has to be in a new row. Let's look at this. Okay, so we've got the first row of headers and it's comma delimited, so Access or Excel will know when it sees this comma that that's going to be a new column. It's got date as the first column, time as the second column, and concentration. There's no comma there, so this is all considered to be the header of the third row. And then there's no comma, but it goes to a new line. So this is the first line of the data, and you could see that it starts on August 8th at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the ozone parts per billion concentration is 50.9. And one of the things that's really important is that you keep track of the number of rows that you import. Sometimes it really helps figure out what's going on. Well, how do you know how many rows are in this? If you go to, and this is opening by default in Notepad, if you go to View, and then make sure this status bar has a check next to it, and if it does have a check next to it, if you could see way down here on the right hand corner, it tells you where your cursor is. So right now my cursor is in line 2, column 2, and that is just a way of telling you how many rows you have in this text file. And if you go all the way to the bottom and put your cursor in the bottom row, it says that you're in line 337, and we know that there's one header row, so we've got 336 rows of data. The last date is the 22nd of August at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to write that down in the database logbook. And going back to the first row, we've got the 8th of August at 9 o'clock in the morning for a total of 336 rows of data. So we're going to write that down in our database logbook and then take a look at this checklist again. So it's a comma delimited text file. We've got headers in the first row, data begins in the second row, no blank rows. It contains complete dates. Each time is in a new row. There isn't a 0 in the first row, which is really common for precipitation, especially out west. It contains a known and logged in my database logbook number of records, and I've got a backup copy saved. Now the final thing, it has to be saved in the Tribal Data Toolbox version 2.1 folder on the C drive. So what I need to do is go back to this, and it's ready to be saved. I didn't have to do any manipulation for this. I'm going to save as, and I need to tell it in my C drive, go to my Tribal Data Toolbox 2.1 folder, and I'm going to save it as new import, and then I've told it here that I want to save it as a text file. I can add .txt, save, and now let's check. So I go to my Tribal Data Toolbox folder on my C drive, and there it is, new import.txt. So that's it. Now I'm ready to open up the toolbox and import this ozone data.